We are. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Crawford. I am a volunteer with Cybertrust America, and I'm here with Josh Lawton to discuss some general cyber hygiene and best practices for you. So, Josh, I think I can let you start off maybe by introducing yourself, letting everyone know who you are, where you're from, and taking it away.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Josh Lawton. I'm the Director of Engagement for the Global Cyber Alliance. We have offices in New York City, Brussels, London, and then also in Singapore. And what we focus on as a nonprofit is working with organizations across the world, small businesses in this case, to be able to help them become cyber secure with both knowledge and information, but also free tools that they're going to be able to use so that they understand that cybersecurity isn't something that is intrinsically expensive and beyond the reach of small businesses or unknowable, ununderstandable. So that's what we focus on. That's what we do. And for anybody, because I know as small business owners, we like people who've been in our seats. So I've started to run a couple small businesses and end up selling them to different organizations. So I definitely get that understanding of you got way too much on your plate. And so let's chat about how we can bring this on and not overload you.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. And yeah, a little bit of my background too. I am a previous small business owner myself. And in my early and mid 20s, I founded and ran a small packaged goods company. And so while it wasn't in the technology space, I certainly I can contend with that mindset that there are much more important things on my plate than to think about than IT or cybersecurity in general. And fortunately, I can say that at my small business, we never had a cyber incident. But looking back with some of the knowledge I've gained now, that definitely wasn't because we had best practices in place. Honestly, we just got lucky. And I think it was, about a decade ago. So at a time when these cyber incidents weren't as prevalent. Today, I'm not so confident that given the way I was securing everything by myself, that we wouldn't have experienced an attack today.
Well, and that's the amazing thing, and maybe that's one of the parts we want to start out on because you're right. Business fundamentals, right? The foundations of our businesses, right? We started with cash flow. We started with good accounting, right? Good marketing, good customer service, right? A good product. And a lot of times we forget that uh, cybersecurity, especially today, is foundational, right? It is a business fundamental. And the reason why is this: 43% of all successful cyber attacks are against small and medium sized businesses. So you're not too small for them to actually go after it. And here's a scarier number, right? And this comes from the SEC. According to them, within 12 months of a successful cyber attack against a small business, over 60% of businesses will shutter their doors. That's a huge number, right? This is one of these things where sure it might feel like a black swan event, but it's not. And this is something that is can destroy a business because on average, each remediation of a cyber attack is upwards for small businesses and medium-sized businesses of over $200,000. And I don't know about you, but when you were running your small business, I know when I was suddenly losing $200,000 that I wasn't expecting to try to repair things. I didn't have that, right? That would be very difficult for me to make up the difference on.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah, that kind of money just to have available at a moment's notice for one of these events, I don't think it certainly wasn't something that my small business had on hand. And the other thing too is it depends on the nature of the attack too, right? Like there might be $200,000 in kind of remediation damages, but what happens if my business's social media account was taken over and lewd comments or something were posted damaging my business's reputation? The cost of retaining customers or trying to educate customers that this wasn't actually my business, there was a cyber incident, that can easily get into millions and millions. And I can understand why small businesses have to shut their doors after events like this, just being unable to contend with all the fallout that it can create.
Well, that's one of the differences, I think, when you and I both ran smaller businesses and what individuals are seeing today. And it does depend, to be frank, on the industry you're in, who you're working with. But a lot of the contracts you're seeing as a small business in order to work with larger sized businesses have something about cybersecurity. Because if you look at the vast majority, especially let's take a look at huge US national security type breaches, they didn't happen normally at the Northrop Grumman, the Lockheed Martin, those really high levels. They happen down at their suppliers, at the supply chain, at their subcontractors down the line. And so one of the ways that they are mitigating this, partially for their own good, but also because of cyber insurance requirements, is now requiring these small businesses to lift their game, right? Become even better than they are today. And so that's something that as small businesses kind of grow and look at what they want to be able to do, cybersecurity is essential to being able to go after that. And this gets back to, well, what do you need to do as a business owner? What are some of the fundamental pieces to be able to protect yourself? And that's key because it doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that one of my I think concerns would be, yeah, the cost and then just the technical kind of debt and the knowledge, that I think that I have to have, in order to implement some of these best practices myself. And so maybe some clarity on that, on, just how much knowledge does one need to implement some of these best practices? Do you need to be an expert in cybersecurity or IT or a software developer?
It's funny. Everybody thinks, and everybody thinks IT, right, is this magical monster that nobody can ever figure out, right? It's this thing that eyes glaze over, especially when you talk about cybersecurity, right? Eyes just glaze completely over. And the reality of it is, it's not hard to approach. And the reason why is this: a lot of people, when they think about cyber attackers, right, is they think about John Travolta, Swordfish, those type of individuals doing crazy type things to be able to get into your business. But the reality is, over 80% of all successful cyber attacks come from phishing, right? Just randomly receiving an email that's going out there. And they're starting more and more to use smishing as well, which is basically phishing, but on text messages. And I'm sure if you're like me, especially if you're owning a business, you're probably getting a lot of texts from people and numbers that you wish you weren't receiving texts from. So when you look at that, what is the number one thing that you can do to be able to protect yourself, protect your business, and do it at basically a zero cost? And that's training. We think all about systems, but systems never solve a human problem. And humans are inherently the weakest link inside of the cybersecurity chain. Goes back to phishing, right? Why do people phish? Because people click on phishing. It's a very basic concept, but it's true. And so one of the things that we believe at Global Cyber Alliance is that giving people and individuals free tools to be able to do this is essential, especially to small businesses, because you don't have the money to be able to pay for some of the larger type of organizations who come in and do cyber training. Not that they're bad. There's great partners out there. There's people that you could spend your money with. But if you're like a lot of small business owners and you're kind of counting pennies and you're looking at cash flow and float and all these other type of items, being able to do training for free is important. And there's places you can send your employees, right? From Coursera to our LMS at gcatoolkit.org to YouTube to others to be able to help train them in a course of action to make them aware of how somebody is going to try to use them for nefarious reasons. The second part about that is there's a couple of things that you can do to help prevent the human aspect. And one of those ways is, we now know people are going to click on that link, right? They're going to download that PDF. It's just going to happen. The second step about that is putting in, and a lot of people look at antivirus, but there's this great nonprofit out there called Quad9. So QUAD 9. And what it does, it has about, at this time, I believe, 17 different threat intel feeds, right? And these feeds allow you to know with some certainty which sites are good, which sites are bad. And so what happens is, before your computer reaches out to that internet to be able to go to that site, it hits within nanoseconds Quad 9, and then comes back and says, yep, you can go to the site. So it lets you go past go, or it comes back and says, nope, this is a malicious site, do not go to it. So it even prevents the actual user from getting on. And to be frank, for the vast majority of small businesses who are operating either on a bring your own device or they're giving out laptops, you can do this in 30 seconds. If you have a MacBook, you can do it in 30 seconds, and it's easy to do. All you put into an advanced DNS, which is a setting we have, they have guides to be able to show you, is 9:9:9:9, and then press apply, close out, you're done. You've done the deed. And then the final one really comes down to you as a business owner understanding who has access to your systems, because a lot of times, and I've done it, I'm sure Mike, you've done it, everybody's done it. We've given access to systems to our employees, and then we forget. It's just kind of
Sure.
standard. And we give them over access, which both makes us susceptible to an insider attack, because those are real, real ways that individuals steal your money. But we also give them the ability that if somebody is able to use them, right, through social engineering, make them believe that they're you, they're me, they're whomever. Well, suddenly this person has a huge amount of access to the entirety of the system. And that right there in and of itself could easily be controlled if you're properly giving people the roles and permissions inside of your HubSpot, your CRM system, right? Your email, your administrator, your website, right? If you look at those type of things, you're going to find that you've probably over provisioned, gave people, too many people too much access to your systems, and you need to bring that and scale that back down. So if you can focus on those things, and by the way, nothing I just said was technical, like literally
Right.
nothing, right? Training, right? Everybody goes to YouTube, everybody can go and put in a URL address, right? Click play, read, learn. Second one, sure, is it technical? Maybe, but you just go to settings, look at the video, 30 seconds later, right? You've got that protection inside of it. And then the last one is you just looking at roles and permissions inside of whatever system you're using. Once again, HubSpot, Gmail, Squarespace, doesn't really matter. And making sure you've provisioned the right people for the right things. And those are the three big ways to be able to set yourself, set your business, set your employees up for success.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what I particularly like about that advice is, like you mentioned, free of charge, right? None of this is going to require a huge bill. And also the technical debt is really low. And so something as simple as that Quad 9 that you mentioned, right? You're essentially just leveraging, a large tech company with a large cybersecurity budget to just use their list basically to double check on your behalf, right? Before you're visiting any websites.
Absolutely, and one of the things, and let's be frank, every nonprofit is a business, right? They none of us can buy a shirt based on love, as Run DMC once said, right? So every place has that, but what's good about them, what's good about GCA, what's good about others, is that they have donors who believe in a mission. And one of the things that you should check with any free tool that you're going to use is, what are they doing with your data? What are they doing with the individuals who are going out there? And that's important to think about, because you may not care, right? The vast majority of us, right? Google is a verb. Google something. Well, guess what Google does, right? You're using a free service, and they're making money on advertising. However, there's a benefit sometimes of using organizations that have a pretty tight security policy. And by that, I mean so that it isn't easy for somebody just to come in and take your data. And they're not going to resell their data. You're not going to repackage the data. Most of these free tools, if anything, will aggregate data. And mostly that's for to see, hey, where are the attacks coming from? So I see an attack in Texas. I see an attack in New York. And you start bringing it together to understand maybe how a DDoS attack is occurring. That will mitigate that and fix that. But it wouldn't tell you Josh or Josh's IP or Mike or Mike's IP is going out and doing all these different things. The
Right.
other side about that, and it is important. And I see Lons, there's definitely alternatives to Google, right? I mean, look, I use Mozilla. Shout out to Mozilla Firefox. I like it. I like the Mozilla Foundation. Once again, another foundation, and it has private mode if you want to go private. There's VPNs out there to obfuscate where you're going that you can get for free. Careful, a lot of the free VPNs do sell your data, but you can pay minimal amount of money for it. So there's a whole lot of ways to make yourself anonymous. But just remember this: you can make yourself anonymous through VPN, through going private, doing everything else. But if you sign into your accounts on Google and you start searching, guess what? You're giving up the game. Now it's wide, and that's one of the important parts about it. The other thing that businesses think about a lot is what we used to call two-factor authentication. And what that simply
Yeah.
was basically, if you've ever bought something on Amazon and you have some type of protection on it, highly recommend. Once again, when you talk about fraud, cyber security criminals, if they get on one device, you got to assume they're on everything, right? Which is a huge change of passwords. update your system by just clicking automatic updates on computers and make sure they update. But it sends you a phone number, or excuse me, a number to your phone by text. There's a thing called multi-factor authentication, and Google has this, Microsoft has it. There's a whole lot of authenticators out there where you try to log into something and you open the app on your phone, because most people never have it on their laptop, and it will give you a special code that's randomly generated that then you put in the system and you're online. The reason why you want to look at multi-factor authentication is because the vast majority of us tie our text messages to our laptop. And one of the ways that people gain access to your system, to larger systems, is stealing a computer. And they could just randomly steal a computer, right? People steal all the time. And suddenly, if the only thing protecting you, your email from logging in, is a phone number that is going into your computer, well, you don't actually protect it, right? Because it's right there.
Yep.
Just put it in. So, that's part of the training, and that's part of thinking through some of these issues and understanding what's going on in the wider space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that, I believe when it comes to like that multi-factor authentication, a text-based one is better than nothing, certainly, but an authenticator app, like you mentioned, I think offers just a higher level of security, again, to avoid some of those incidents when, if they steal your laptop and you're getting text messages just sent to your iMac. It's pretty easy to get that one-time passcode then. And so, I know Google Authenticator offers a great one. In general, multi-factor is there in case your passwords are compromised, right, or leaked. And maybe that's not even your own doing. Maybe, we've heard about all of these major data breaches at these major organizations that house our passwords and data. And, God forbid, if they're not hashed or salted, and plain text passwords can get leaked. Basically, you could have really good hygiene, but because of another business's doing, your information can still end up out there. So in terms of like password hygiene and best practices, do you have recommendations? I know password managers are usually recommended just with, maintaining the sheer amount of passwords that we're supposed to have, a different one for each service and everything.
Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of password management, password vaults that you're going to be able to use. And going back to Global Cyber Alliance's toolkit, right, we recommend a couple of the ones that we find to be valuable, but also that we find to be free. The important part about whatever password vault you use, whether you choose to pay for it, whether you choose to go free, the important part for you as a business owner is two things. The first is that it automatically ties in and self-generates the passwords for you for the website. And that's really important because they're going to put a string of characters in there that you and I would just not remember. Just point of fact. And it generates random emails for random passwords for each login that you're looking at, which is very important. The second reason why you want this and you want it for your company is because if you are issuing out laptops, if you are issuing out different things, right, the hope is that you have an administrative access to the physical laptop if you need to get into it physically. And that could be for not a bad reason, just could be you're helping out the employee. But when that employee gives a computer back and it might be a bad termination, they might just, here you go, ship it back. And then if you can't get into that computer because you forgot the passwords, you don't have that, then, well, now a computer is basically bricked. You're just not going to get into it. And so those are really good reasons to have a password vault that you can have and use inside of your business. And the other reason why a lot of people, might look at Mozilla Firefox, might look at Google, there have been some issues with storing passwords inside of browsers. It's not wide ranging, but there are issues with that. So it is nice to have a little bit of a separation between where your passwords are and where you're doing your searches, where you're logging in to different places. So that's a good reason to think about a password vault for a small business.
Absolutely. Right. And you're mentioning the Global Cyber Alliance Small Business Toolkit, right? And so I think one thing that I had taken a look on there was your DMARC analyzer. I don't know if you think that applies at this level to small businesses, or just if all of that is kind of handled at by Google or our email providers anyway.
I mean, absolutely. So there's this thing, we have a DMARC wizard, right? So there's DMARC, SPF, and DKIM. They're different protocols. What does this actually do? What does this actually mean? Well, What it ends up being is a way to know that an email is legitimately from a business that goes back and forth. And what we built is a scanning tool to be able to scan your domain, scan your email, and see, do you have these things automatically set up? Now, sometimes when you're setting up your email administration account, you might set that up automatically, and
Mhm.
some services will do that. But it's always good to be able to check. And once again, this gets back to two parts, right? If you're a large organization, right, you're going to have to insert the actual script that we actually self-generate for you into your email server. But if you're a small business, right, it's a couple clicks. Once again, I mean, these Google Office, Microsoft 365, they're set up for these type of protocols. And once again, it's not a technical protocol. It's just a click, right? Let's turn this on. Let's turn this radio button on. And so, once again, it's not difficult to be able to do. And it's something, whether you want to use our tool to figure it out, or you want to just go on, onto your email administrative setting, you'll see if you have it. So
Yeah, I
those
can
are kind of the
definitely
ways to look at
recommend.
it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I can recommend your tool. I used it myself, and it was very seamless.
There we go. What'd you
It
find
produces
out?
good output. Yeah, I found out that we needed to update our settings.
There you
Yeah,
go. Yeah.
our policy was basically just kind of an accept all, so we had it in
Yeah.
place, but we weren't enforcing the policy, and so opened
Well,
your eyes there.
and that's a part too, right? You're not enforcing, you may not be quarantining to see, what is going on. And it goes back to the human factor, right? If I can prevent a phishing email from ever getting to an individual, right, then I've just stopped that whole chain of events, which could
Yep.
lead to a successful hack. And
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
I mean, it's huge. The other part too is if you are semi-technical and you kind of want to see what's going on, well, that's perfect to be able to use. And the last part is we often think of cybersecurity as just me, just my business. What we really need to start thinking about cybersecurity as is almost like we think about public health, right? One of the terms that is coming out that a lot of people are using is cyber hygiene, which really comes down to making sure that we are all protected. So if we all take these type of actions, right, suddenly herd immunity starts coming into play into the cyber realm. And that's, from a safe citizen, from a good business individual, that's a pretty good reason to do DMARC, SPF, and DKIM. It's also a pretty good reason to train your employees and yourself on what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, no question. And from just a completely selfish point of view too, as a business owner, like you said, when you're implementing DKIM, SPF, and DMARC, you're protecting, your business's name essentially, or your email address from being used maliciously, right? From a hacker trying to send emails on behalf of your business. So these tools can help prevent your reputation and your customers as well.
And that's important, right? Because think about it, right? The business at the end of the day, if you can't email out to somebody, and this is the benefit of all those filters that you see, right? Your spam filters and everything else. If you get caught in one of those because somebody gets access, forget about it, right? I mean, you're not going to be able to reach out to anybody. You're going to be coming up in spam even if they see you, right? If they don't see you because you're just going to spam, that's it. I mean, it's a kiss of death. So
Yeah.
you really need to think about, once again, it comes back to there's a reason why 60% of all small businesses fail within 12 months from a successful hack. And it's not just that, it's a whole multitude of reasons, but good Lord, if you can't even get an email outside, right, to set a meeting with a distributor,
Yep.
what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. At that point, you're worried about keeping the lights on. So, well,
And I guess, and I think that's one of the things when we talk about different steps that are, important to train your employees on, right? And it's also important to discipline yourself as the owner. And so one of those is actually communicating with your employees on company approved communication platforms, right? So if you use Signal, if you use Teams, doesn't matter, but or Slack, it doesn't matter what tool you use, as long as it's known that that's the tool that your company uses. And the reason for that is every employee at a certain point in time might get an email supposedly from the boss or a message from us on a cell phone, supposedly from somebody who says, "Hey, buy this gift card," which is one of the number one scams out there, right? Because once you
yep.
give that information, money's gone, it's being spent. So you want to be able to let people know this is how I communicate, this is how we communicate in this company. And the other thing to think about when you're going through this is the fact that what does every employee do when they get a new job? Man, they announce that on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm new here. I'm fresher. I don't know anybody here, right? And suddenly, if you're an attacker, well, shoot, I now know everybody who works at the company. I can start looking at everything they've done on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and I can start putting a profile together to try and socially engineer you to give me access. And then one thing about brand new employees is, you always hope, right, as a small business owner, is that they really want to impress. They really want to do work. And so they are, the initiative that they have sometimes makes them stop thinking and says, you know what, the boss wants me to do this. Let me get it. Right. The boss forgot his computer and he needs access to this. Let me send him the password so he can sign on from his cell phone. And that right there in itself can be dangerous. And by the way, one of the key way, I mean, it goes back to training, right? It goes back to understanding kind of what's happening. The number one way that you should stop and pause, right? Whether or not somebody says, I am Josh, and it could actually be me, right? Is
Right.
if you look at your cell phone and there's not a name up top, you've never really, you never talked to this person. Never have. So at the very least, stop, pick up the phone, call, and it might just be me, right? It might be a phone number you've never known me to have, but it made you stop. And stopping half the time will, from yourself to look to think, a lot of times will stop that cyber attack dead in its track.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that goes back, especially in a small business setting, towards kind of the culture set by the owner, like you were saying. And so in the example you just gave, right, that employee who's new and wants to impress, they're feeling pressure to maybe do something that they shouldn't have removed quickly because they don't want to let down their new boss. But if kind of from day one that culture is set that cybersecurity is extremely important, in the event that an employee makes an extra phone call to verify that, the boss of the company would never look down on them for something like that. In fact, they might commend them for taking that action. I think again, it all starts with our actions as leaders, instilling this mindset in the teams.
Well, absolutely. And let's take it a step further. This is something that happened to me about a decade ago. Was my bookkeeper, who was, you call him a CFO, right? But when you're a small business, that feels like, it's like North Korean generals and medals, right? You can have any title but my title at the end of your small businesses, right? But he gave it to me. And one of the things he brought up is he said, look, we're going through the list of what we paid, right? Money out, cash in. And I'm looking at some of these invoices. It's just weird, right? And so I asked him, like, hey, what's going on with this invoice? What's happening there? And they pay it, and I go, I'm not necessarily sure what this is. And what happened was somebody, right, invoiced us, and probably what I did, right, I'll take the fault, is I probably said, pay it. I mean, yeah, it's a Superman fallacy, right? It's $50, pay it, whatever. It wasn't that much money. But we saw that invoice kind of growing, right? Because they want to make more money. They want to test that boundary. And
Yep.
the simple thing that would have been done for that, right, is two checks, and which is what he did. But the other part about that is knowing who your vendors are and knowing where those emails come from. Because when you looked at that, when you looked at where it was coming from, and it's really easy when somebody sends you something from QuickBooks just to click, pay, you're done, you're in, was
Yep.
there's just one letter. One letter was off, right? It was two N's instead of one M, right? Easy to forget, easy to mix up. But if I would have paused and looked at it, right? If he would have paused and looked at it, we probably would have recognized and did exactly what we did in that room and said, wait a second, this is wrong. We got to stop this. We got to fix it, right? We got to raise a red flag. And that was an invoice fraud, right? That's not even a
Right.
cyber. That's plain invoice fraud, plain, low key kind of social engineering. But that type of thing happens all the time. And a lot of people never even realize it because they're in, it's for a little bit of money, they're out, and it's going to take you more time to figure out why $8 came out of your account, whether it's personal or not. It's going to take you more time to figure out why $120 came out of your account, then it's worth going after. And that's why they do these type of things. And then, by the way, you're on a list and they will keep on targeting you over
Exactly.
and over again. Because they know what? They know you're a sucker. I was a sucker. And they're going to keep on pushing you until you don't become a sucker anymore.
No, totally makes sense. And I know we're bumping up against our time here, and so I certainly wanted to give the audience a chance to ask any questions that I might not have asked. I know we have some small business owners in the crowd, so please feel free. And then Josh also put his email address in the chat too, so please take that down in case you have follow-up questions later.
Yeah, please feel free to reach
Yeah.
out to me, whether it's about tools, whether it's about kind of thoughts. Lon talked about, how can we partner? What can we do together? Reach out. Let's figure it out. Because once again, cyber hygiene is the important part. So feel free to reach out to me at that email address.
Yep, and that the first step is just starting the conversation, right? So I'd say attending this symposium is a great first step. So, all right, awesome. And kind of along this note of just cyber hygiene and best practices, in our next session, Lan is going to be joining me, and we're actually going to be going into a little bit more detail about some of the solutions that Josh had shared, whether those be password managers, VPN solutions, things in safe browsers, things of that nature. So please do join us in that next one for some more detailed talks.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll see you in the next session.
Definitely.
Right. Thank you, everyone.